Let's don't talk about that.
All right, we're live. No one's in here yet, but just so you know.
So something we can debate when everybody gets in here. I mean, Gonzaga's pretty good. And I watched the '09 game. I tweeted it. I watched the '09 championship right before this. Just the first half. And it pretty similar. I mean, somebody on Twitter said they don't have a Ty Lawson, but I'm not sure Carolina had 4 or 5 guys that could hit threes all day either.
Yeah, I mean, Jalen Suggs and Andrew Nimhard. Nimhard's a great player as well.
Yep. I mean, they are wearing out Mobley.
Yeah, he's a good player.
Let me know when people start trickling in. We'll start acting right. I mean, the only way, and I don't want to jinx it, but the only way they lose is if Kispert gets hurt or if Suggs gets hurt.
Yeah, it's going to take someone getting hurt for it to...
Yeah, or Drew Timmy. Oh, no. Baylor's good enough on defense. Baylor has a lot of athletes, too. Jared Butler, Mitchell.
Mitchell's my favorite player, but I'm telling you, the way he got in foul trouble the other night, he gets in foul trouble against Gonzaga, and it's over. But, I mean, Timmy was just dominating to start the game and not getting any calls.
I want to see a Drew Timmy, or not Drew Timmy. We'll say Drew Timmy versus, what's his name? Matthew Mayer.
Who's he? Oh, yeah.
They kind of look alike. I was going to say
versus the mullet.
Yeah, Timmy, because I was going to say Kispert, but Kispert, it's Timmy who looks like Mayer.
It's fascinating, though, to watch how Gonzaga and Baylor have managed the portal. And now this is going to be the year of the portal.
What do you mean?
Transfer portal.
What transfers does Gonzaga have?
Nimhard.
Yeah,
that's my cousin.
You mentioned that, I think, before. That. Can we get some swag?
Yeah, can we get some national championship swag?
I don't even have his number. I just DM on Instagram sometime.
If you guys are in the chat, make sure you say what's up and put your questions so they get in. The first questions in there will be the first questions asked, for sure.
Yep, and like I said last time, we ask you a question and we pick it at the end of the day. You get a little bit of IC swag.
What's the guy on Baylor's name? Like Masio
Teague.
Masio Teague.
He plays for UNC Asheville.
Did he really? That's the transfer?
Cincinnati to Asheville to Baylor.
Sounds like you're reading somebody's tweet there, Gregory.
The T. Ashley IC.
Let's see where Greg Barnes is. We'll get this party started. And if you're in the chat already, we might have a couple special guests. We'll see how it shakes out.
I mean, Gonzaga led by 20. What was it, 36-15? And then it's kind of just chilled since then.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 20 or 19-point game right now.
Yeah, I mean, they're just messing around.
I hate undefeated teams.
Nah, 32-0, baby.
The thing is, Gonzaga's definitely, best team in basketball. But if they play in a Big 10, Big 12, ACC, they probably go undefeated. But if they play in a Big 10, Big 12, maybe SEC, they probably drop a few games here and there.
I mean, if they go all the way in this tournament, there's no reason to think that they only lose more. They don't lose more than 1 or 2 games in any conference.
That's what I'm saying. And, because I think Tommy's right. Like, with the 09 team, it's a good comparison. But with the 09 team lost, 4 or 6 games?
33-4, I believe.
Yeah. And if they play in the Mountain West, you got to did 09 lose to College Charleston? Was that team?
I don't think.
What was it? They had one. Did they have one bad loss?
They lost, let's see, BC. They lost to Wake. They lost to Maryland in OT, and then FSU in the ACC tournament.
So it was all ACC teams?
Yeah.
Was College Charleston the next year, maybe 2010 team?
Let's see. Good luck.
I don't remember. I saw College Charleston beat them in Charlotte.
Yeah, that's right. It was after the championship and then like one of the early games, college Charleston. But I think if that 09 team played in the Mountain West, then they probably would have gone undefeated as well.
All right, so let's talk football first. Obviously, people that are watching the live stream, we're sort of all watching Gonzaga finish off USC in the Elite Eight. Talk a little football, and then if and when we get any special guests, and if and when Luke needs to dip out, we'll switch over to basketball, portal talk, and maybe the comparison that we were just talking about. Greg, for your thoughts, the comparison is this year's Gonzaga versus Carolina 09. Let's start this podcast rolling. Here we go. Welcome to the latest Inside Carolina podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley, joined by Greg Barnes, Luke Buxton, and Gregory Hall on the wheels of steel. That means it is on the beat. And of course, as always, we're live on YouTube streaming. So if you're joining us there, welcome to the show. If you're listening later, you missed out. You might have missed out on some Inside Carolina swag. But one thing you can't miss out on is Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Great sponsors of Inside Carolina, great friends of Inside Carolina premium subscribers, especially. And also, they've got all the Carolina gear you could ever imagine. Baseball gear, tailgating gear, home gating gear, and of course, all the football, basketball, and all the sports that you could possibly ever want. Shop them online at JohnnyT-Shirt.com or shop them in person on Franklin Street. They need your support. As we do support them, you support us, and vice versa. Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. All right, fellas, I'm going to bring you all in here. Carolina, we'll start on this one, Carolina football news. Spring practice in full effect. A couple questions on the football board we'll get into, but Greg, I'm going to start with you first. Mack Brown certainly very excited about the team he has. We talked about that. We talked about Bateman and Longo and how they're sort of giddy over what they've got coming in. But today, Mack Brown talked about some things they need to shore up. And with Joffrey Brown getting hurt, it's going to give Carolina time to figure out who these receivers are going to be for this team. What have you learned? What have you seen in the first week of practice?
Well, I think the biggest thing about this spring practice and how UNC is approaching it is that Mack said it, spring practice is really key for teaching. And when you're trying to build depth, because depth was an issue.
I mean, the thing is, people like Geico because it's just
that's critical.
So what are you
waiting for? I think fans are designed to think, okay, who's working with the ones, who's working with the twos, what's the depth chart right now, and what Mack has said publicly, he said privately, he said it in different ways. The goal right now is not about depth charts. The goal right now is to find out who can play. And for the young guys, it's about learning what is required of them. As he said a couple times today, and as he said last week, before you even think about competing for a position, learn the position. And this is the time to do that. And so once you get into training camp, when you're 4 weeks away from the opener against Virginia Tech, then you can really say, okay, now I know what I'm supposed to be doing. Now I'm going to compete for playing time. Now, having said that, I think that's very, very key. Having said that, that's critical for the wide receiver position. That's critical for offensive line, running back, and a couple of positions on defense. But you mentioned Joffrey Brown's injury. Bo Corrales is also out. And I think Bo Corrales is probably penciled in as the number one guy at outside receiver. I thought it was refreshing that Mack said that Josh Downs has been not good, but he's been great, which a lot of us were expecting that jump anyway. But to actually hear that 4 days into practice kind of solidifies him in the slot. So now you're looking for outside receivers, and you don't have Bo and you don't have Joffrey. They know what they've got with Bo, and I think once he comes back, I'm not sure if he's going to be ready for the spring game by then or not. They had originally hoped he would be. But Joffrey's not that case. Like he played some last year. He really needed the spring to kind of cement himself as a legitimate threat there. Emory Simmons is there, who's really kind of a technician. They like him. Blackwell's been dealing with a little bit of an injury that he's coming back from. So there's a lot of playing time available. And, we're not talking about depth chart stuff. We're just talking about learning these positions and putting yourself in position once training camp comes around to really be able to compete for playing time. And so, yeah, I think trying to figure out who's going to be at the outside receiver is a question mark for Phil Longo and Lana Galloway right now. And losing Joffrey is pretty bad for him, but it also hurts the team.
And
Let me stick with you, Greg. Hold on, Gregory. It's something that people ask me about, and I heard Mack mention it, but Bo Corrales' injury, is that the same deal he's been dealing with, or is this something fresh, Greg?
No, he had a sports hernia. God, I can't even talk. Yeah, hernia. I was going to say the technical term, and I can't pronounce that, so we'll go with sports hernia. And that I've got a story coming out about that this week. But essentially, he was running a route against Patrice Rene last year, tried to stop on a dime, and really felt something kind of pull. And he was going to try to play through it. He played a couple games, and once he decided he was coming back, they decided to go ahead and do the surgery. They did the surgery the first week of December, and it's just a slow recovery time. So that's kind of what it is. He's just trying to get back to full health with that injury.
I had one of those when I was 6 months old. I recovered pretty quickly, so I'm sure Bo can get back to full speed shortly.
Did you say 6 months old?
Yeah, I did. Greg was like, yeah, I agree.
My wife did the same thing. So whatever it is about elite athletes and young infants.
It always makes me think of somebody said he pulled a groin.
Right.
But it's a little bit more serious than that. Gregory, go ahead. I cut you off earlier.
No. Sorry, I didn't know you were going to go into Bo's injury. But to Greg's point about Joffrey, what's overlooked is he was the number 3 receiver last year as far as wide receivers in yardage. Not catches, because that went to Javonte, I believe, as far as third in catches, and Michael Carter. But he had 15 catches and 337 yards, which is, I mean, obviously Diami had over 1,000 and Daz was just approaching 700. But Joffrey showed that he has that capability of being kind of a deep threat guy as far as yards after catch, and even, I don't know the technical, I'm blanking on the statistical term, but just yards through the air in general. But yeah, 15 catches is a small sample size, so there's kind of a little bit of proven ability, but they were really looking forward to Joffrey in this spring, especially with Bo out, just competing, because Josh Downs has stepped up, as Greg said, and he was so impressive on Saturday. I mean, Josh Downs was making Jacarius Conley and the nickels and anyone that was asked to guard the slot. I mean, Josh Downs was getting separation on whoever was guarding him. And one, he just had 2 defenders kind of looking around like, where is he? And Josh was in the end zone over the middle of the field walking in. So yeah, he was really impressive. So that's kind of what they expected Joffrey to be. So Joffrey being out definitely hurts what they were looking for at receiver.
And Gregory, we were sitting beside each other at the practice on Saturday. Who was pretty locked in at the number 2 slot receiver?
Wasn't it Olsen?
No,
it was Gosnell. It was
right.
Olsen was on the edge, which I was kind of surprised that he was on the edge, but it was Gosnell at slot.
And I was impressed with him. He was pretty clearly the number 2 guy at slot, and he's a lot quicker than I thought. Good speed. He's coming off the same kind of groin injury that Bo's dealing with, but that was a kid that really stood out to me.
It was his quickness that we were kind of. Go ahead, Luke. Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say he had one catch to the sideline, threw it behind him, and he had to go and kind of turn his body and make a turning catch, got his feet in. Did not think he was going to be a guy who came in and made an impact day one, and he surprised me, as Greg said. What are your thoughts on Emory Simmons? Because I think Emory showed some really good flashes, and then Mack in his press conference today didn't seem so sure-footed on him. Do you think he's going to have some numbers this year?
I think Emory Simmons is heading down a path kind of like Antoine Green of having a high ceiling but not living up to those expectations. Just based on what Mack Brown said today, kind of when he was talking about receivers. Like, he mentioned Gavin Blackwell before he really mentioned Emory Simmons, when Blackwell had a limited jersey on, has kind of been dealing with a little bit of being banged up. But I think Emory Simmons needs to break that threshold of expectations to kind of avoid having what Anton Green's season last year was, as far as not really being trusted by the coaching staff. Greg, do you agree?
I don't know that I do. I look at it from a different angle.
Every time Greg rolls his eyes to the back of his head, I'm like, okay,
No,
well, just give me out.
I've been married for 18 years, so that's just inherent in me. I think Emory, I think his ceiling is lower than some of these other guys, and I think he probably gets more out of his potential than the other guys do. And I think that's one of the reasons the coaches like him, is because he does a lot of things very well. I think with Antoine Green, I think his ceiling's through the roof, right? But I don't think he's anywhere close to kind of his potential. And I think that's where some of the frustration with the coaching staff comes. I think if some of these guys come in and they blow it out, that's going to knock Emory down a little bit. But I think Emory's a guy they can rely on to do all the little things right. But there's other splash receivers who, if they can reach potential, they can do more damage. And I think it's good to have Emory. But I agree, Mack's wording today. That's probably one of the first times I can remember him not having glowing praise of Emory. And it wasn't like it was a critique, but yeah, it wasn't the normal. Emory's doing everything right. It was more of, he needs to come along, which was interesting.
I think Carolina, if they can get a lot of production at Antoine Green, will be huge. I mean, from what I've heard from guys inside the program, before his leg injury, he was the guy. He was the guy everyone thought was going to be, the Diamis and the Daz and Chapel Hill. And then since then, it just hasn't been the same. And Sam has had great praises of Antoine in his press conferences throughout the years. So, you got Bo, you got Josh, you got, Joffrey when he returns. Can you get really good production out of Gosnell, Simmons, and then Antoine? I think will be the key for next year.
One of those guys that, when Greg, you talking about guys who can kind of make a splash, some of the younger guys. I mean, the best catch of the day that I saw on Saturday was J.J. Jones. I mean, he straight up mossed his defender. I'd have to go back in the notes to. Oh, it was over Obi Egbuna. I mean, he on a comeback route, and Egbuna was face guarding him very, very well, but JJ just turned around and literally jumped over him and grabbed the ball. So that's another young guy that could surprise people if he continues to work hard. And with having Joffrey and Bo out, that certainly helps kind of open spots to shine, at least in the spring. So
I think from a fan perspective, people see Emory Simmons making that play against Notre Dame, that catch in the end zone, and then wasn't it the NC State game that he just sort of abused
the
NC
one
State's
he
defensive
pinned it on the
backs
guy's back,
and just he kind of toyed with them. So we'll see how he comes along. I agree with you guys that Antoine Green, and we talked about this on Inside Carolina Live, which we were doing at the same time y'all were sitting in Keenan Stadium last Saturday watching practice. So I was only slightly jealous there. Antoine Green's a guy this spring that's got to make his mark if he's ever going to do it at Carolina. And so certainly don't want to see guys getting injured, but with Brown out, then you've got a guy like Green that can take advantage of those extra reps. Let's look at the other position on the offense maybe that a lot of people are not necessarily concerned about, and that's running back, clearly. If Pro Day was anything to show, and folks didn't already know, Carolina lost two of the best ever at the position. So, Greg, I'll start with you again, and then we can sort of flow through it. I mean, is Ty Chandler going to be the guy, or is Caleb Hood doing these things in practice that show up on Instagram going to get people sort of drooling for him to get a lot of reps out there?
Yeah. I thought DJ Jones looked really good. He's quick. He's got a good burst. And Josh Henderson looked pretty good. So I think the takeaway for me from watching practice on Saturday is that they really are rotating a lot of guys in, trying to figure out who can do what. Now, certainly it was Jones and Chandler by my count who did most of the work with the ones. Chandler's got a little bit different build. He's not as thick as some of the other guys. He's kind of a taller, leaner, but he's got good speed and he's got good hands out of the backfield. And in Longo's system, you've got to be able to do that. And so I think that's beneficial. the fact, as Max said today, that he's played in games against Florida and Alabama, and no stage is going to be too big for him, and that's key. That kind of gives him a leg up, because even though he's new to the system, they know how he performs on game day. And that's one thing Larry Fedora always said, like, these freshmen look good, but you just never know how they're going to respond when the lights come on. But what's going to happen with Chandler. So I think the coaching staff is comfortable with him, and he's kind of checked some of those boxes. But I think they've got a lot of options. Like I said, Jones is unique. He's got good speed. But to your point, Tommy, Hood is not like the others. And he's really kind of a bowling ball and can lay some hits. And he had a couple hits where, I'll give you an example. I was jotting down notes and I heard a pop. And it's kind of the pop that you'd hear with Javante, and you look up and it's Caleb Hood knocking a defensive back backward. A lot of the other guys don't do that. So there's value in that for sure. We'll just have to see, how quickly he comes along, and if he can be a key part for this team this fall.
It's going to be fun to watch that position group, because the offensive line's going to be great. Sam Howell's going to be great. If they can get running back production and guys on the outside, then Carolina could have a special offense again. This is a live show, so when things are live, things happen. And I mentioned a special guest, and Greg and Luke and Gregory are always fun, but I got one coming here. Let's see who's going to pop up on the Zoom call. Here we go.
Hey,
Mr. Sherrell McMillan.
Right in with the Jordan brand. Right on cue.
Of course.
Hey, Sherrell, did you see Luke get Mack to take his shoes off and show his shoes to the camera today to brag about his swag?
I did. And those are among the best Jordans ever. So,
are you an 11 guy?
I'm an 11 guy. Yeah, I am.
Yeah. I'll put those behind the ones. It can't be the ones, but 11's next.
11s and 3s for me. I hear you though.
Fair.
Man, these young guys! I tell you what, I had 1s, 2s, 4s, maybe the black ones with the silver on the side, the mesh, and then I had some other, and my mom threw them all away after they were old because they stunk like really, really bad.
Well, take care of your shoes, Tommy.
Why are you doing anything in them anyway? They're Jordans. Like
that was back then. That was back in the day.
You're not supposed to wear them. You just buy them to put them in the room.
When they came out, you wore them. If anybody's listening to this, I had the ones, the black, white, and red ones, and then the black and red ones when they came out initially, and I could have sold them to somebody in Asia for $3,000 if my mom hadn't thrown them away.
I'm waiting on Greg to come in and say I had the New Balance 990s, 992s, 997s.
Yeah, I got some Asics too that are sweet.
Oh, there you go.
I had some Brooks. Look, somebody was talking about, and this is a funny story, and again, this is Inside Carolina Podcast Live, but we had a store back in my hometown named Woodall's. It was a clothing store. And Pumas were really popular back in the day. And Spud Webb and another guy, I can't remember who it is, I had to find the poster, were they were the Puma people. And they came to Woodall's in central Johnston County and signed autographs, signed posters for anybody that bought a pair of their shoes. So I had Spud Webb's Pumas back in 1987. Beat that. How old were you, Gregory, in 87?
In 1987? -11.
Unbelievable.
The last time that I saved up, I remember about $100 for some of the first sets of Jordans back then. The last expensive pair of shoes that I bought for basketball was the Reebok pumps, where they had the little basketball on the tongue. Yeah. See, old school was on the little basketball on the tongue of the shoe. It wasn't the pump that actually came out later. You could pump that joker up. I don't know why that was relevant, but
it was like a little basketball.
It was, right?
Yeah.
Is that the song "Pumped Up Kicks" is about? They're about those shoes, right?
Oh my
Sure.
Look at those blank faces. That's what I was expecting. My dad was a freshman in college, by the way, Tommy, in 1987.
So your dad's not much older than me. I appreciate the good hands. Yeah. The reason that story came to mind is because Marty and McGee were talking about Cougars, and Cougars were to knock off Pumas back in the day.
That's right.
And man, listening to those two dudes talk about Cougars, it was hilarious because they were absolutely right. Anyway, Sherrell, you joined the show, the On the Beat podcast, for your basketball expertise. Let me ask you just a general overview question. How crazy, or how much more crazy, is this transfer portal going to get? I mean, it is ridiculous. I think one of the best tweets I saw about it, and they said that the transfer portal was going to be preseason top 5. I mean, it's ridiculous the number of teams going in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still unclear because we don't know when they're going to cut it off. So right now, everyone's kind of in this permanent kind of purgatory with their rosters because I think with the one-time transfer exemption and with the portal, there's an idea that, okay, on a certain date, you can't put your name into the portal, transfer, and be eligible in the fall. But there's been no guidance for that because they haven't voted on the one-time transfer yet, which isn't supposed to happen for another couple of weeks from what we're hearing. So, I mean, it could go on into June. You just saw the NBA draft stuff come out. So I think guys have until correct me if I'm wrong. I want to say like June 15th to put their name in to declare for the draft. And then they have until July 15th to pull out. So there are some teams who won't even know what their roster looks like on Independence Day. And that's just really different from what has been really forever in college basketball. So to answer your question, I think it can get crazier because it almost feels like one of those things like a snowball going downhill. Everybody's like, well, oh, so and so's in the portal. I thought he was happy where he was. Maybe I should get in the portal because maybe I can team up with him at insert school X. And, maybe we can grab this other guy from insert school Y and go to, school Z, and we can team up and for 1 year have this, recreate our AAU team. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but guys are having those kind of conversations behind the scenes.
It is mind-blowing. I mean, and I didn't realize that most of them are seniors, but NC Central's got 9 guys in the portal.
Why not? I mean,
it's like 9 of the 14 on the roster Lavelle Moton's got in the portal. And, of course, he shops in the portal quite often anyway, but it's just bizarre. Greg, covering this stuff, and I know Sherrell does the recruiting stuff, but how does one manage a team without any guidance from the NCAA?
Difficult.
I mean, like, if there's no – first of all, this rule is not a thing yet. They haven't set the deadline. I mean, is the NCAA serious? I mean, really? This is a clown show, isn't it?
That's the NCAA for you. And seriously, it's we had this conversation while we were waiting on Mack Brown today on our Zoom call. But the NCAA historically has been reactive with everything. They've never been proactive. And so what that means is instead of saying, we think we should take this step, and so we're going to study everything, and we're going to make sure we have all, everything dotted and crossed so that when we release this, it makes sense and people know what to do. But instead, they get so much pressure from the outside with regard to name, image, and likeness, with regard to the transfers and the rights of student athletes, that instead of just saying, you know what, we're going to take this strong approach, they're saying, all right, fine. If you want to be able to transfer. And okay, great. What are the guidelines? Hell if I know, right? That's how the NCAA has always been. And it's a problem. And so when you have somebody like Roy Willliams, who's never been one to dally with transfers and those kind of things. I mean, he's had 4 grad transfers in his entire time at UNC and no regular transfers. This is not something he's familiar with. And so now he's having to become familiar with something that doesn't even have guidelines. And so I think North Carolina is at a disadvantage for sure in this situation. But everybody kind of is, because as Sherrell said, this is not going to be voted on until after the Final Four at the April meeting. And then at that point in time, I mean, you've got what, 2 months maybe before a lot of these decisions have to be made. Good luck. And so it really is kind of navigating and hoping you pull uh, the right, what's the word? Push the right
Lever,
buttons, I guess. Yeah,
lever.
lever. There you go. That's what I was looking for, lever. Yeah, it's going to be a mess. And I think it is beneficial a little bit for North Carolina that they're not going to be looking for like 5 guys. And so you can be a little bit more cautious. But some of these teams that need 2, 3, 4 guys, it's gonna be rough.
And Tommy, and I think the other thing that's tough for coaches is, say you think your roster is set, right? You think you have, let's just say you think you have 10 guys who you're 100% know they're coming back. Well, if you dip into the portal and say, "Ooh, I'm looking at this kid over here," well, there's nothing to stop your player from saying, "Oh, you're looking at this guy. Well, maybe I should start exploring my options and using my leverage and using the power that I have as a player who doesn't have to sit out a year to figure out what's best for me and my family." So it is a balancing act for coaches. You want to improve your roster always. All the football coaches always talk about how roster management is a 365, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week type deal. But at the same time, you have to kind of be mindful of the feelings of the players on your team, because when Inside Carolina or whoever reports that North Carolina is interested in so and so, if so and so plays the same position as someone who you think is solid, then that could impact them. So it is a really enormous balancing act and juggling act that they're having to do right now, and they're trying to walk on eggshells, but also get their team better. And it's a lot to deal with, frankly, for the coaches.
Gregory, any questions off the live chat for our limited time Sherrell McMillan?
There's a one comment that's saying that UNC has 4 open basketball scholarships so far. I haven't really been tracking amount of scholarships. Sherrell, is that correct? 4 open.
If you make a couple of assumptions, yeah, that's 4 is a good number to assume. Yes.
If that's the number they have, do you think UNC fills all 4? So 2 with the incoming freshman fills 2 of those spots, correct?
No, that's 9, including the 2 incoming freshmen.
So how many of those 4 get filled?
My guess would be 2 to 3. They usually like to leave one left over for the walk-on group, and that scholarship kind of rotates each year between the different walk-ons on the team. And then, I think Roy Willliams isn't the type who wants to bring in 3 transfers in one season. Now, if he could do, one high school player or something like that, and then another transfer who maybe has a couple years left, and then maybe a transfer like a super senior, I could see something like that. But I'd be very surprised if they brought in just 3 straight transfers. So I would say I would expect North Carolina to use probably 12. Maybe be surprised when they use all 13, so 4 more. But I would say I'd be surprised if they use sign more than 3 more guys in this class.
And then another question is, do you expect Idu or McCoy to get offers this week?
You never know, because Roy Willliams is the one who controls offers, and unless you're in his mind, you can't. You can look at clues and say this makes a lot of sense, but you just would never know. McCoy, I'm not sure. We reached out to him right after he kind of said, announced that he was entering the portal, and he just was like, "I'm open to everybody." So we'll see. It was a little surprising because I think he was in line to get a good amount of minutes at Virginia. Next season, you could kind of see him ramp up a little bit, play better. Sean Moran put something on the premium board just about how some of these guys have played recently, so that was surprising. With Jonas, I think I think he is a prime candidate for what UNC is looking for. And it's just a matter of Roy Williams talking to him a couple more times and getting comfortable. So I do think he will eventually get an offer. As far as timing, I just couldn't tell you, because that's only one person can tell you the timing on Carolina offers.
Sherrell, to that in that regard, as far as timing, I mean, Bobby Patterford obviously was not going to get a Carolina offer, and he committed to Kansas. What kind of time crunch is this? Because that's the one thing on the message boards people were fretting about is, Roy Williams is going to wait, and end up with nothing or very little. I mean, is there a reason to fret at all on this timing with what, 1,000 players in the portal at this point.
One thing I always say is that the urgency within the Smith Center is not nearly as much as the urgency outside of the Smith Center. And that has been true for many, many years. I mean, me and Ben will kind of be like talking and looking over things like, well, what are they doing? Why are they not doing this? And then we'll talk to sources and they'll be like, oh, well, they're fine. They're good. They're not worried about it. They've got X and XYZ contingency plan. So I think that's usually the case. And in regard to the transfer portal and stuff, over 1,000 names in there now officially. So we're looking at 30% right now, pretty much of all college basketball players are in the portal, and we'll be at 33% probably in the next couple of days, which is just staggering to really think about. Every team basically has 3 guys in the portal essentially. So there's that. And then, if guys start filling up, start committing to places, there's going to be a situation where having scholarships open and not having filled up is going to be very valuable. So we talked about how, there's no guidelines for this, right? No, right now, there's no deadline for anyone to put their name into the portal. So who's to say that the player of the year from a major conference, in May is like, you know what, I'm not feeling my situation, don't like it. And say he's like a position that Carolina's looking for. Say he's a tall shooter or a hybrid forward or a center or whatever. If you fill up now with some of the people who are in there, then you lose that chance at that person. So I think that's why you'll see North Carolina be aggressive, but also prudent when it comes to who they offer and who they're looking at. Because, I mean, there's no reason that, someone who's an All-American or returning All-American or something, they could become available. That's the thing. You just don't know. So I think you have to plan just in case and have contingency. So that's why I would say urgency to some degree right now. They're talking to people, they're calling people, but also be open because you don't know what's going to be available down the road. A couple of years ago, nobody expected John Beilein to leave Michigan, in I think it was May when he left. And Jalen Wilson decommitted and eventually took an official visit to Carolina in June. If they had filled up on scholarships, in April, they wouldn't have had that opportunity. So I think there is some intelligence behind at least having a scholarship or two saved for that reason.
It is musical chairs, and then you don't want to be the one left without one. But Sherrell, you always bring the normalcy, I guess, to it when you think about it. One final thing before we let you go, and I know that you joined us with in the child rearing years, to put it lightly.
I've got the monitor right here, and I see one kind of moving. I'm like, oh no, please just go to sleep, man. Just sleep. I don't know why it's so hard to sleep. Like we get to our age, and we're like, oh, if what I could do to just sleep. In their age, they're like, no, I don't want to sleep, and it's so painful.
They don't want to miss anything. But I think by the time our second one came around, we threw that monitor off that screen port. So needs, are we 100% sure that Carolina's needs are a hybrid forward and a backup 5, and then maybe a shooter, a guard shooter? Or I mean, where are they in that regard? If they got 4 left, they'll definitely use 2, maybe. Definitely, maybe, probably. So where are the exact needs for this team?
Backup 5 to Walker Miller.
I'm Walker. I go to UNCG, but that's another story. Go ahead, Rev.
Yeah, I'm not 100% certain on anything right now, so I wouldn't tell you as such. The best information we have and add to kind of the context clues of how they usually do things and all that stuff, it seems that they do want a hybrid forward. So that is just think about Luke May was probably the last one, and I know that is a controversial statement here over the last couple of weeks.
Don't show Luke May tape.
Think about Luke May. Think about Jawad Williams. Think about Marvin Williams to some degree. Those are kind of the prominent what we would call hybrid forward or stretch forwards that have been at Carolina under Roy Williams. So someone who, in a pinch, could probably play some center. But someone also who, plays the 4, but can also play on the block, but it can also kind of go out to the 3-point line. So I think that is a need because there were conversations about spacing and I don't want to call it modernizing, but just tweaking things in their end of year meetings. So I think that's something that came out of it. They really want a hybrid forward. And now I would say too, it's not like they haven't tried with hybrid forwards. If I really wanted to, like we can name about 40 since about 2015, or I'm dead serious, since about 2014 or 15 that they've offered. They just haven't gotten them. Luke May is kind of really the one that they were able to get. I think Nasir Little was kind of in that mold, but not exactly. So they want that. And then they're going to have a backup big because Sterling Manley, Walker Kessler, Dayron Sharp are all gone. The expectation is that Garrison Brooks moves on, which is what we've shared with some of our premium subscribers, and then Armando Bacot has a decision to make. So regardless of what Bacot's decision is, whether it's stay or go, they're still going to need more bodies. He can't play, by himself down there. So they need that. And then I think, until somebody else on the roster proves that they can shoot, you got to keep bringing people in and just making sure that, if you have 9 guys at the 1 through 3, maybe you can get 3 of them to shoot well. Or if you have 10 guys at the 1 through 3, maybe you can get 4 of them to shoot well, something like that. So I think they'll, address that. But I think that will be more case by case. It would have to be a special player in order for them to really look at that. So I think that's where they are right now. But again, that stuff, it's changing. It could change by the time this is published and posted tomorrow.
All right. Greg Barnes chimed in on the Slack with a question I was thinking about, but Sherrell, we're going to debate this before our break and then before we let you go. 09 Carolina or 2021 Gonzaga? I think they're pretty similar, to be honest. What saith you?
I'm gonna get in trouble. The 09 Carolina team got bored, and I think it showed a couple of times during that season. So I would take away points for them for that reason. I don't think you've seen Gonzaga, maybe once. I think it was like Santa Clara or somebody they struggled with a little bit in that first half. BYU, they were down by 12, I think, at halftime. Ended up winning by 15. But Carolina, I think they lost their first 2 ACC games. Is that correct, Greg? To
or 2 of their
Boston
first 3.
College and some teams that
Wake
weren't
Forest.
Yes.
2 teams that weren't great.
They were 0-2 in
Yeah,
ACC
it was
play.
0-2.
Boston
Charleston
College
was
and
in
Wake
between.
Forest.
Charleston was in between.
So at their peak, I would take North Carolina, I think. But consistency-wise, I think Gonzaga has been a more consistent team across the season than North Carolina. Because, Carolina had just come back from a Final Four where they were embarrassed, and nothing they were going to do during the regular season honestly really mattered. It was just about getting to the tournament and then turning it on when they got to the tournament. And you saw what they did over that 6-game run. So to answer your question, this is Carolina. It's inside Carolina, so obviously I'm going to say Carolina. But I think Gonzaga was probably the more consistent team because they didn't have some of the lulls that a UNC team did.
Do you think playing in the Mountain West changes that?
Oh, I mean, yeah, to a degree, certainly. It's an easier conference. Let's not be wrong, but at the same time, they've played everyone. I feel like they played a really good non-conference schedule. Teams that we thought were good and just blew them out of the water. It wasn't even close. You talk about Iowa, and then you talk about Virginia and a couple of others. So
West Virginia, Auburn, Kansas.
Right. I mean, they played high-level competition outside of their conference. But I just think North Carolina's best is better than this Gonzaga's team's best. But I do think Gonzaga, will go down as one of the better teams if they're able to win 2 more games and win a title.
I'm looking at Ken Palm here, comparing both teams. It's kind of fun as far as looking at efficiency standpoints, things like that. Both were the number 1 offense from an efficiency standpoint. Gonzaga a little bit on the defensive end, but that could be kind of tailored towards competition about how much teams can score against them and just score in general. They were both number 6 in tempo. And then they were both pretty high in non-steal turnover percentage. They weren't making a lot of mistakes. They were both top 10. The only really glaring difference is just how efficient Gonzaga is from 2-point range. I mean, today was their 54th straight game, shooting above 50% from 2-point percentage, which is pretty remarkable.
Well, and what's remarkable about that is who coming into the Elite Eight, who led the nation in 2-point field goal percentage defense?
Southern California.
USC.
41.5. Gonzaga shot 57% from 2.
They were showing like a comparison of what USC's defense has done to teams they face in the tournament. And leading up to today's game, every team that they faced was at least 10 points below their season average. And Gonzaga was above their season average today.
I mean, I just don't know. Obviously, Ty Lawson and Tyler Hansbrough are difference makers for that 09 team against this Gonzaga team, but
The last time, not to, again, as Sherrell said, I don't want to get in trouble. The last time a team made it this far in the NCAA tournament undefeated was
Kentucky,
2015.
They
That
were-
was a
yeah.
loaded
Duke.
team, and
Yeah.
Wisconsin also had a
Wisconsin.
very good team that year.
Dude, yeah.
Spoiled
It's
the
crazy
party.
they didn't get to the championship.
But no,
Yeah.
I mean, Sam Decker had like the game of his life, and then against Duke, he couldn't
Do
Yeah.
anything.
He just lost his mind. It was like the Monstars got him or something.
Sound like a little like Brad Davidson and then against Baylor.
Here's
Well,
the
yeah,
interesting.
Hey, Sherrell,
Spe-
but
speaking
you're
of
on-
Baylor, go ahead, Luke.
I was gonna say, is my screen sharing on? I got a little
I don't
because
know.
I've been so wrong on so many takes I've had.
Oh my God, are you gonna show your bracket?
I want to show my bracket for the.
I don't know how to. I don't know how to
Yeah,
make it
anyways.
so you can share.
I will say it wasn't my first bracket, but in my second bracket, I predicted the entire West region correctly.
Nice.
So after
You-
getting Georgia Tech to the Sweet 16,
The team
Michigan
of
State
dogs,
to
a
the
bunch of
Elite
dudes.
Eight,
Is that what you said
and
about Georgia
UNC
Tech?
on, and getting all those wrong.
You had
my
Michigan
second-
He
State
had
in the
Michigan
Elite
State
Eight.
in the Elite.
I'm not gonna
I
lie.
had the 11th seed in the Elite Eight.
No,
I
you
it
had
was
Michigan
It was
State.
You had the
Michigan
wrong
State,
one.
but I clicked Michigan State or UCLA, and ESPN auto filled it out. So I got one of them. Right.
During that Georgia Tech game, I was like, poor Luke, because like they were hanging in there. You know, they didn't have right, and I just felt
Yeah.
bad for you. I was like, honestly, you're the only person on my mind watching that Georgia Tech Loyola game.
Hey, I was watching Skip Bayless and Stephen A. I learned the biz. You got to throw it a take and then ride with it. It's the new sports media era we're living in. I just read the consequences.
I can't figure out how to let you show your
It's all
bracket,
good.
but it's
You
probably
just gotta
good.
trust
It's just
me.
the West
Just
is
trust me.
perfect. It's
It was bad, consistently bad.
So, Tommy, before we depart off of Gonzaga, I will encourage anybody listening to us or watching us, if you haven't watched a Gonzaga game, you're doing yourself a disservice. Make a point to watch the Final Four, because as much as we've talked about what the issues were with North Carolina this year, I don't know how many times I heard Roy Willliams scream, "Move!" this season. Gonzaga moves all the time, and they don't take bad shots. Jalen Suggs is a freshman, and I watched him against USC tonight in the first half 3 times dribble into the paint, realize that Evan Mobley is one of the best defensive players in the country, is there. He doesn't panic. He doesn't throw up some crazy shot. He either makes a pass or he just dribbles out, and they start the set again. And it was textbook. I mean, every possession was clean. They got good looks pretty much every single time. You compare that to what we saw with Carolina this year, and you can see why there's a lot of issues. And I think it's very clean, very fun to watch. I mean, as I said, USC had the best 2-point field goal percentage defense of anybody in the country, and Gonzaga wasn't even shooting threes good, and were able to build a 20. USC had their biggest deficit of the year with 6 minutes to play in the first half. That's how good this team is.
It is not fair, and we're about to have another special guest, I think, join us here in a second. But Sherrell, talking about Baylor, I mean, I loved Mitchell for Baylor. Can Baylor hold up against Gonzaga?
I don't know. I haven't ever been able to buy Baylor. I know they're like the second best team in the country. It's some kind of it's a me problem. It's some kind of programming issue that I just can't buy Drew's teams for whatever reason. But yeah, I mean, if there's a team who can do it, it's Baylor, just because, pencil them in for 12 threes a game. And then if they really, start getting hot, they can make 20 threes in a game very easily. And if they're hot, it's going to be hard for any team Gonzaga included, to stay with that if they get really, really hot from three. So I think that's part of it. They like to play some, I don't want to call them junk defenses, but they play very different styles of defense and they switch a lot. So I think that could give them some trouble. And then, like you said, the guards and the athleticism that Baylor has kind of on the wing. And really, honestly, I guess through 1 through 5, the athleticism they have could give Gonzaga some trouble too. So I think that would be a great game. It would be one of those, Carolina, Illinois type games where you have pretty much the two best teams and everybody knew it the entire season. That doesn't happen often where you get the two best teams in college basketball. So that's what I'm rooting for. I'm tired of the shenanigans with, these small schools and, 11 seeds. Like I want the big boys. I want the Titans. I want them going against each other so I can see some really good basketball.
Does
So I'm
Houston
hopeful
count
that-
as a Titan to you?
No, the Houston does not count as a Titan. That was, my eyeballs were just glazed over watching that game. I do not, all due respect to Kelvin Sampson and his style has worked in different places. It's just not a style of basketball that I care to watch. Like it is numbing. Yeah. Anyway, as someone who was raised on ACC basketball and Dean Smith and Gary Williams and Coach K and that style, I can't stand to watch the way Houston plays. It's almost repulsive to me, to be honest.
Well, it's funny to me, all these 11 seeds and 12 seeds and 15 seeds, if Michigan handles business tonight, it'll be 3 1s and a 2 after it's all said and done. Luke Buxton, we had a special guest bounce in. He bounced out, some technical difficulties. But, Luke, I think you're going to have to leave us, man. What? Have you not done your homework?
Done the homework for the podcast, but unfortunately I didn't do the homework due at midnight, so may have to bounce out soon.
Priorities, my man. Look,
it's not even 10 p.m. You got like another hour before you have to start.
I got 4 pages to write, and they ain't gonna write themselves.
you can't narrow the margins and like have your pages like this.
I'm gonna do, instead of double space, I'm gonna do 2.2. So maybe that will help a little.
Right.
Get Greg to send you his Venmo and just have the master write 4 pages for you. He'll be done in half an hour.
There you go.
Yeah,
Hopefully my
that's the best
teacher's
one.
not an IC subscriber. That would be
And I hope my child is not watching this because he's going to Carolina next year, and he'll be like, "Well, Luke Buxton waited to the last minute." All right, dude, be good.
it's
He
only-
also
it's
stole
only,
road signs, but
Oh, jeez. Okay. It's my time to bounce. Appreciate
Later,
it, fellas.
man.
Bye, Luke.
All right. See you
Peace
later.
out. Luke is gone. I'm going to take a short second while I bring in our other guest to talk about Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Sherrell loves some Johnny T-Shirt. Sherrell is probably the biggest purchaser of Johnny T-Shirt on this podcast for sure, and he can attest. It's the way to go. It's the way to be if you're going to support IC and UNC and local businesses. Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com, and you get 10% off your everyday order. I'm going to take a second to pay the national bills. We'll be right back with Inside Carolina on the Beat podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley. And we're back on the Beat podcast, Inside Carolina on the Beat podcast. I say it 3 or 4 times because I'm trying to click the admit button for our next special guest. Here he comes. Of course, I've got Gregory Hall, Greg Barnes, Sherrell McMillan now. And there the man is. Mr. Dewey Burke has joined the show. Dewey, what's happening, my man?
What's up, team? How's everybody doing?
good to see you, Dewey.
Good.
We
Dude,
are
I don't
on
know
the-
if we've ever met, by the way. So hello.
Hello.
This is Greg's son, Gregory. He is one of our Inside Carolina famed interns. Dewey, we're just sitting here talking about everything Carolina related, but one reason I wanted you to come on is because I wanted you to talk about sort of the exit interview process with Roy Willliams that you experienced back when you were at Carolina and how it went, just to sort of give some color to these last couple of weeks for Carolina fans that have watched all this, ups and downs and disgruntledness turn into not so much and all. Just share your thoughts on what the last 2 weeks have been like and what they were like back when you were there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously, it depended on who you were and what what year you were in and what you were getting ready to go do. You know, for me, not that anybody particularly cares about what my meetings were like, but you know, anytime before my senior year, it was how can you help our team better? And he goes to the staff and gets recommendations from each coach on what they think you need to work on and how you can get better. And for me, that obviously meant how can I help prepare the guys that played major minutes better? How can I prepare them better for games? And that's what our conversation was about. And just doing everything I could off the court academically. He expected me to continue to do that and those kind of things. So that's what my meetings were like. For the guys that were, you know, maybe considering turning pro or wanted to have a conversation about that, obviously it was quite different. You know, we're fortunate to have a lot of Carolina guys in and around the NBA that coach can go to, not to mention just his friends and connections, but even just Carolina guys he could go to get an honest assessment. I mean, back when I was playing, Mitch Kupchak, right? He was the GM of the Lakers. George Karl was still coaching. Dave Hanners was still in the NBA. There were a ton of guys that coach could go to get honest feedback about whomever the player in question. And, you know, I don't know how much it's changed since then. Probably not a ton, except for maybe who he talks to get those assessments. And then, you know, he sits down and gives consideration to what your family situation is, financially, what you know, where your family may or may not have needs, what he heard. Are you a first round guarantee? Are you a lottery guarantee? What is his opinion on what you should do? Some guys listen, some guys don't. And then you kind of go from there. And I would assume a lot of these conversations the past couple of weeks have been over Zoom as it relates to the parents participating. Sherrell, you can probably speak to that better. But that's weird because for guys that were thinking about the NBA, those were always in person. Everybody was in coach's office together. I even remember some guys, AAU coaches or high school coaches, coming in for those meetings with the parents or with the grandparents or whoever the close advisors were. And, you know, coach was always great about it being about the player first and what was best for them first. There's this conception out there that Coach Williams finds ways to keep 5 stars in school longer than they maybe thought they would, which is preposterous, obviously. He's got the ability to get honest feedback from important people in the NBA and tell you what he hears. And the nice thing about that is it's not from agents or runners or people in and around professional basketball that have skin in the game. He gets an honest assessment from executives and or coaches that probably have a Carolina tie. So it's going to be honest. So kind of rambled on there, but I would imagine it's still pretty similar.
Dewey, let me ask you this. How sacred are those meetings amongst players? Is there a lot of talk, like you get out of your meeting and you go talk to maybe your closest friend and kind of share what the different perspectives were? Or is it kind of, I had my meeting with coach and that's kind of between me and my business? Or is it kind of like depends on the type of person?
Yeah, probably more just personal and for you to kind of store away. Like I still have the sheet of paper that Coach Williams gave me after each one of my meetings because it was on, you know, letterhead and was written out what he wanted me to work on. Like that's a pretty cool memento to have, right? I doubt a lot of guys kept those, but I did. So yeah, they're really more or less for you. I will tell you that my exit meeting after I finished playing my senior year, I overslept and missed it. Great move as a walk-on, but coach and I joked about it that what was he going to do? He couldn't make me run, you know? So, but yeah, that was not a good move on my part, but whoops. But anyway, so no, I don't remember talking about each other's meetings with my teammates. I think it's just, it's a pretty personal, private thing, I would say.
Dewey, I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit. We know that Roy is stubborn, but we also know that he's shown an ability and a willingness to adjust as necessary in recent years. One of the strong narratives on the IC message boards is one that I don't agree with, but I want your opinion on it. Is that the game has changed, which I think we can all agree on that, but that because it has changed, Roy needs to change with it. And Roy needs to be willing to part ways with the concept of his traditional two bigs and go more towards a 3-point shot heavy offense with better spacing for better use of the pick and roll, those types of things. And that is because of those changes and his unwillingness to make those adjustments the past 2 years that UNC is kind of where it's at. I think there's a lot of holes in that argument, but just in terms of the general concept there, just wanted to get your thoughts.
Let me ask you a question. Why did Walker Kessler leave? What do we think? Just simple, playing time, right? Probably above everything else. So we should have played less bigs this year. I'm not saying you're the one who's posing this to me. I just don't.
Right.
We had 4 bigs this year that were all skilled and capable and deserving of minutes. And yet the cry is that we play less bigs. We play 1 big and 4 perimeter players when we had 4 guys that were very capable. Our senior big was probably our worst big in terms of upside and ability, yet he was the ACC preseason player of the year. And so the argument is we should be playing 4 out, 1 in, or 5 out and playing no bigs when we had 4 bigs that all deserve minutes and everybody's upset that we're losing Walker. So you can't have both, right? You can't have said Walker should have played more. Mondo had a great year. Dayron should have played more, but then said we also shouldn't play 2 bigs. So I don't understand. There's a lot of holes in the argument, as you say. With this year's team, we were built to play 3 out, 2 in based on the makeup of our roster. And if anything, we all kind of hope now that Walker played more, right? So I don't understand how you make that argument with this year's team. Now, maybe other seasons when we didn't have that amount of talent in the post, I could understand it. And he's done it. We all remember years back when he played PJ Hairston at the 4 for the last 10 games of a season because the roster makeup dictated that. This year's team did not dictate that. Next year's team might. I mean, we'll see. Right now, we have hopefully Armando coming back, and then it's unclear. So maybe we'll pay a lot of 4 out, 1 in and play more of a freelance, less secondary, and allow more room for penetration for guys like Caleb to get to the rim. The other argument that we don't run off pick and roll, still can't see that one. Every late shot clock play, we run fist. That's a high pick and roll. Caleb had license to call horns whenever he wanted. That's a double pick and roll. We have 3 different secondary sets that the initiation by the point guard is a pick and roll. So that to me doesn't hold water either. I understand the frustration that we don't shoot and make as many threes as a lot of teams, but I also just watched Gonzaga. The first half of that game, I'm behind on DVR because I put my kids to bed. I just watched the first half before I hopped on, and I watched someone dominate in the post by throwing the ball in there again and again and again and again. And their entire offense was run through throwing the ball into the post, which is what we try to do. So there are a lot of holes in that argument, Craig. I understand the perception that we play an old style. What were we supposed to do this year with this team with those 4 guys? I don't understand. That's a rhetorical question. What were we supposed to do?
Right, and I would make the argument too. As much as people want to harp on the traditional 2 bigs thing, that by far was not the big issue this year. The issue was, I mean, if you want to talk, can't shoot, right? It was guard play, and when you have freshmen that you're relying on at guard, and they're having issues shooting besides Kerwin Walton, and you got the turnover issues.
How well did our bigs play when we shot the ball well?
Yeah,
absolutely.
They play great. So
because the spacing all of a sudden improved.
You don't have Caleb Love trying to drive into a 5 guys on both teams in the post. Like, yeah, it's 100%. It provides spacing, and even when they're not shooting well, when they're getting good shots, then you can have the attack the offensive boards, and it's just if it's a threat, it allows the bigs to play better. Yes.
That's right.
I would add too. I don't even know that it's a thing about having bigs per se, because I think it's more about rebounding, because that is the number one thing that Roy Williams wants to do. Is, I think we all agree on, he wants to rebound so that he can have more possessions, so he can get the other team in foul trouble, so he can get to the free throw line. And if you have more possessions, then you're likely to score more points and you're likely to win the game. So it's not a complicated philosophy. And if you look back to 2018-19, they were still a top 5 rebounding team in the country, because that's what they emphasize in practice, is rebounding. So it's not even it's not even that they have to have 2 lumbering 7'1", 250-pound guys in the post, with their backs to the basket. He
Luke
just wants
May.
to He just wants to make sure that they're rebounding. And if you told Roy Williams that he would lead the country in rebounding with a 6'7" forward, a 6'6" guard, and a 6'8" forward, he might look around for a second and be like, you know what, that's fine. As long as I'm leading the country in rebounding, I'm fine. So I think that's what people have to realize too, that it's not even necessarily about 2 quote unquote traditional bigs. It's about rebounding. Like that's what it's about.
Oh, I think that's right. And again, and Tommy, we've talked about it on our podcast. It was difficult to navigate the 80 available minutes in the post with the 4 guys that we had. If you look back in history, since Coach came, we've had extreme success when we had 3 bigs to rotate. It just worked out minutes-wise. 2005, Sean, Jawad, Marvin. 2009, after Zeller gets hurt, Hansbrough, Thompson, Davis. And you can keep going, right? We've had several teams where the 3 big rotation worked out well from a minutes perspective. They had 4. And so something we need to be honest about, and I think it's been on some of the message boards. Walker played very poorly in the first 4 to 6 weeks of the season. He did not play well. Now, he might have been practicing great. He might have been beating Garrison in practice. We won't know that. But he did not play well. In fact, I remember going back to a text message between myself and some of my teammates when we were watching a game in December, and we literally said, you can't play Walker. You can't play him, because he was such a liability. Now, it's amazing that 2 months later, he was the guy that did what he did against Florida State and had those breakout games. I get it. The game slowed down for him. He got away from his COVID quarantine stuff. I understand. But the product on the floor did not warrant a lot more minutes. And I get the argument, you got to let him grow. Okay, fine. But when there's 4 of you guys and you're not performing, you're going to have a short leash. I don't care where you are. That would have been the case down the road at Duke. That would have been the case at Kentucky. Nobody has a quicker hook than Calipari, by the way. And he did not play very well in those early games. Go back and watch. And so it's a difficult thing that ended up happening because he flashed how good he could be. It's hard to play with 4 bigs in our system. It's better with 3. And Walker didn't earn a lot of minutes early, in my estimation. I don't know what you guys think, but I remember a number of times, and Tommy, we talked about it, you almost couldn't have him on the floor. He was a liability.
Especially in that, Greg, was it the Syracuse game that followed the Florida State game?
Syracuse game up there, yeah, where he just didn't know what to do against the zone.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as Kessler, and I've I tend to forget one-year players pretty quickly. But if he has a great year this year, he's gone anyway. Sherrell would probably say otherwise, but the way people go, I mean, like Dayron, I don't know if he could have played any better for North Carolina. He could have had better numbers and more minutes, but it sort of is what it is. For me, it all comes down to shooting the ball, Dewey. And we can all agree that if Carolina shoots the ball, if they shoot 40% from 3 this year or 35% as a team from 3 this year, we're not having these discussions, period. And it just didn't happen. And that's the bottom line. Dewey, let me back up a little bit to the exit interview question, because I had one and Greg rightfully changed the subject. But how much, over the last couple of weeks, and it's not just Carolina, guys enter the portal, they get frustrated, they want to leave, they want to go different places. How much would that have happened had it been that way, a no-sit transfer rule back when you were at Carolina? And I don't want you to name players, But Carolina had a lot of talent, and a lot of times, a lot of that talent didn't play maybe as much as they thought they should have as freshmen. I mean, how would life have been different back in your time in Chapel Hill?
And it's so interesting, but it was a different time, guys. It really was. There was no social media. There was no social media. I remember where I was sitting at Carolina my junior year when I created my Facebook. I remember that. Okay. And none of it was on our phones. There was no tweeting videos and pictures and Instagram, none of it. Right. So there just wasn't as much noise, number one. And number two, the result of that is the instant gratification that is expected now of these highly touted players. We had McDonald's All-Americans coming off the bench in droves, right? And this year, if I'm correct, Walker was the only one who came off the bench. Well, Dayron too, in spurts when he started some, and they're both gone. It's just a different time. It sounds weird to say, but that was 16 years ago when I came in around the same time as the class of 05, all those guys. It wasn't the same. You almost can't compare them, because take Bobby. Bobby starts as a freshman, has an unbelievable year, all ACC freshman team. I remember sitting in the locker room in the summer with Raymond Felton and Sean and some other guys and having a conversation like, Bobby Frazier's a pro. He's as good or better than Kirk Heinrich. This guy's a pro. That's how good he played as a freshman. And then he gets hurt, and Ty Lawson comes in, and he gets hurt again, and his career's never the same. And he finishes as a coming off the bench defensive specialist playing 15 minutes a game. McDonald's All-American, who we thought was a pro after his freshman year, right? Danny Green could be the most decorated, not Michael Jordan, James Worthy, Carolina NBA player when he's done. Didn't start, and probably shouldn't have, right? He didn't earn it. He stayed. And so in today, Danny Green, not Danny Green that we know, but a person like Danny Green, gone. Bobby Frazier, gone, right? Tyler Zeller and Ed Davis both came in, 5-star McDonald's All-Americans, didn't start. They probably leave. Just a different time. I don't even know how to compare it, Tommy. I really don't. I'm not saying it's a different character of kid, a better kid, a worse kid. It's the social media era, and it's just not the same.
Sherrell, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, 100% accurate. I mean, there have been a lot of Carolina players who are greats, who have done a lot of amazing things at Carolina, who wouldn't have done those things had there been no restriction to transfer. I mean, just over the last 10 years, again, not to name names, but I can think of 5 guys who played in the NBA or are playing in the NBA who would have left Carolina after their freshman year if they could have, gone somewhere and not set out. Because maybe they weren't quite ready for the NBA, but they wanted to, get a little bit better so they could go the next year. I think someone, we don't like to, people don't like to hear his name, but someone like Rashad McCants probably would have left after Roy Willliams' first year, like 100%.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
And he is one of the best scorers in Carolina history, and one of the reasons, whether or not people like it or not, that they won the national championship in 2005. He wouldn't have been there as a junior. Honestly, a few of those guys on the 2005 team probably would have left after their first year with Coach Williams, just because it was such a change. And
Sean might have left.
Yeah.
Sean might have left. Coach Williams was in his ass so bad, he might have left, but instead he stayed.
Right.
And he worked all summer. He got in shape, and look now. And so again, it's not fair to compare Sean to someone else or whatever. But if they didn't have the opportunity cost of having to sit out, it's chaos. It's just chaos now. It's just chaos. And it would have been this way for every school. And that's the other thing. And Sherrell, I think you can comment on this. It's chaos at Duke. It's chaos at Kansas. It's chaos at Kentucky. It's chaos everywhere right now. Nobody knows who's going to be on their roster. You can't prepare for it. You're trying to recruit guys. You're not sure you have a spot. It's ridiculous.
I mean,
along those lines. Go ahead, Greg.
I was just going to say it's approaching 25% of all Division I men's college basketball players are in the portal. That's the number we're approaching. 25%. Like Sherrell said earlier. I think Rel, you said this earlier. Almost.
I said 30, but yeah, 25, whatever.
Yeah, well, just 3. Each team is like 3 guys in the portal. Almost
Right.
is what we're getting at, which is just it's crazy. It's crazy.
So Dewey, when you've got this situation with what you're talking about, where the freshmen come in with all these expectations, and the willingness for a lot of these guys, not all of them, but for a lot of them, is not there in terms of wanting to work up the food chain. In terms of if they got to sit on the bench and learn, then they sit on the bench and learn, and they're better for it at the end. You have that side of the thing. And then you also have this transfer portal situation where in probably about 2 weeks now, the gates are going to be open and nobody's going to have to sit out a year. What do you do as a coach? And I'm not asking you to speculate on Roy's behalf, but what do you do as a coach when you're trying to build a roster in this day and time?
Yeah, I don't know what you do other than just forget about class. Nobody has a class. You're not a freshman, you're not a senior. We have a 1-year team every year and treat it as such. I don't know how else you prepare, because so let me answer it differently. I understand the argument that if coaches are free to switch schools with no issues and somebody pays their buyout for them, and how come they can do it and players can't? I get that. I understand the argument. And what they're saying is it should be more of a pro model. Players should be able to freely move. What they ignore with that is that professionals have contracts, and they're not 1-year contracts, right? They can be sometimes, but they're 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And so if we want it to be a more pro model, when you choose a school, should you then sign a contract? You want to be paid for it? Okay, then there should be an agreement. Is it a 1-year agreement? Is it a 2-year agreement? Is it a 3? Is it a 4? What's the agreement? Because the free for all of I'm here for a year, and if I want to leave, I'm just leaving. I don't know how the model doesn't implode, right? So again, I'm all for players getting paid, name, image, and likeness, however we arrive at the solution. But if you want to compare it to the pro model, professionals have contracts. And so are we saying that incoming freshmen are signing contracts? And if they are, for how many years? If it's all 1-year contracts for every player every year, okay, then that's the system, and every coach can adapt and every program can prepare. And then maybe it'll be 50% in the portal. Or do they sign 2-year contracts or 3-year contracts? I'm fine with wherever we land. But you can't make the argument that it should be more pro-like and ignore the fact that pros have contracts.
Fascinating. I mean, and I'm sitting here and you're listening to the Inside Carolina podcast. Michigan and UCLA are going to set scoring records, and not in a good way, perhaps.
I was just about to bring that up. I was like, we got a doozy over here.
Yeah, I think UCLA's got 2 safeties halfway through the first half. Let's get down to the brass tacks. We've talked about Carolina and all, and we've got Dewey, Burke here, and Sherrell McMillan, Greg Barnes, and Gregory Hall. Dewey, Gonzaga 2021 versus Carolina 2009. We've been debating this for a while here. Now you're in it. And you cannot be a homer. I understand you know these guys, but you got to do it objectively.
Well, Gonzaga 2021 hasn't done anything yet.
Valid point.
They haven't done anything yet, and don't tell me they won their conference. Not impressed. But they have the opportunity, obviously, to go undefeated and be the first guys to do that since that Indiana team. One of the things you can't do is talk about what the 09 guys ended up doing as pros, right? Because it kind of gives you rose-colored glasses when you think of somebody like Danny and Wayne, who's still in the league, and Ed, who's still in the league, and Z, who was in the league for a while, and Tyler, who's in the league, and obviously Ty. So you think about matchups. I think Timmy and Hansbrough would have been a hell of a battle. Timmy seems like he likes to showboat a little bit. He's pretty impressed with himself. I'd have liked to see what one in the chops from Hansborough would have felt like for him. I don't think he'd been doing all the semantics and just would have been worrying about the win that got knocked out of him a couple times. So I'd have been interested to see if Timmy could have dealt with the physicality of Tyler and our depth in the post. If you think about if we were playing them in the national championship game, we had Zeller back, right? So we could have thrown Hansborough, Thompson, Davis, and Zeller at him. That'd have been a lot for him to handle. Now they have tremendous size on the perimeter. Kispert's big, Suggs is big. Suggs is elite and talented, but he's a freshman. Ty Lawson was a junior. Wayne Ellington was a junior. Danny was a senior. So we had so much experience on our team. I think our depth is better. I think our 4 bigs against Timmy, and I can't name you another one of their bigs. That tells you enough. Kispert was really good, but I think he'd had to deal with playing on the other end, guarding Danny, guarding
Anton
Wayne.
Watson's the only other one that plays significant minutes for him in the
Yeah,
post.
and I saw him in the first half. He doesn't move well enough to deal with our bigs.
Nah.
Kispert would have had to guard on the other end. I like our chances in that game. I really do. Yeah.
To your point about
I think our depth. Yeah, go ahead.
To your point about just the depth with the size is, I think on either end, it's kind of how does each defense kind of guard the offense? Because can UNC's bigs, yes, there's just really Timmy, but we were talking about earlier, Gonzaga moves off the ball exceptionally well. So maybe not at the beginning as much with fresh legs, and obviously rotating in depth helps, but to a certain point, constantly having to move around and follow your guy and guard on the perimeter could wear down. So I just think both offenses would wear down both defenses.
Yeah, and one of Coach's favorite things to say is, it's great if a team says they want to run with us. But when we were really good and really out in transition, they had to run back. They had to play defense against us. And this is one of those games that feels like it'd have been, 98, 93, in that realm. That 09 team was not elite defensively. They were pretty good. They would just outscore you. They just knew they could score 100. They knew they could score 100 and you couldn't, and that was that. And I've yet to see, to this day, Sherrell, correct me if I'm wrong, I've yet to see someone in college basketball that could guard Ty Lawson. Haven't seen him yet. Haven't seen him. So they'd had a problem with him because everybody did.
Come on, Rail. He put you on the spot.
No, I'm with him. I mean,
didn't Rel take Ty Lawson first round in our fun little draft?
No, he did not. He took Raymond Felton.
Oh,
I took Ty Lawson.
You
and
made me go,
did you see how fast Rel said no?
You made me go third person too. I never go third person. But yes, Rel took Raymond Felton. No,
do we still have those rosters? Because we need to give them to Dewey and see who's got the best team.
I mean, somewhere they're on the podcast.
They're in the cloud.
Don't do that to me.
Yeah, because Greg Barnes had Dewey, no disrespect, but he had you as his starting point guard. No,
that's my guy.
No, it was we did a fantasy draft. What was it? Last 10 years? No, it was Roy Willliams era.
It was just Roy Williams era, and it was all ACC and draft pick was criteria within some fun add-ons.
Anyway, Sherrell, I interrupted you there, and I'll say this: watching this Gonzaga team, I've been sitting here thinking, they could give the 09 team some trouble. And then I listened to Dewey talking. I'm like, yeah, maybe not. And it's funny that the 09 team had the 4 bigs when everybody was healthy that we're talking about this year. But anyway, I digress.
And really, Tommy, listening to Dewey go through that, I mean, I think Kispert's ability to stretch the floor would be problematic for Dion. And I think Jalen Suggs is a heck of a player. But junior year, Ty Lawson, I think was the best player on that team. And that's with Hansborough, who's probably the second best player in the country. So head to head, we can talk about the stats and everything, but just hearing Dewey go through the roster, I don't.
And we didn't even talk about the guy who has 3 NBA rings.
Right.
We didn't even talk about
it. I watched Zack Snyder's Justice League. I finished it all 4 hours the other day.
Did it take you a week?
It actually did take me a week. I was watching 30 minutes at a time when the babies were sleeping, just trying to fit it in whenever I could. But it reminds me, we talk about Ty, of just everybody is like, oh, we're really good as a Justice League. We've got Batman and Aquaman and Wonder Woman. We've got we've got Tyler, we've got Danny, we've got Marcus. It's like you need Superman in the end to come in and kind of close things out. And that's what Lawson was that year. I mean, it was like, just go back to the LSU game. He's on one foot and it looks dire for UNC. Like, wow, they're going to end this way. After coming all the way back from that Kansas meltdown, they're back in the second round. They're in Raleigh. UNC never loses in state in the NCAA tournament. And Ty just comes out and just, almost beats LSU in the second half by himself, and off they went. So to me, it reminds me of like Superman coming back at the end of Justice League, the kind of Ty Lawson deal, because at his best, just like Superman at his best, there wasn't anybody that season who could do anything with him.
No. Guys, in practice, when he had a full head of steam and he was dribbling at me, I used to guess. I would just say left, and I would hope that he went that way.
Like a goalie? Yeah.
Like a goalie in a penalty kick. I would guess, because he was so fast and so strong. There's nothing else you could do.
So do we agree that I'm going to win money from Luke and Gregory, Dewey, that it's going to be Gonzaga and Baylor in the finals?
What I have been on your side this
Yes,
entire
you have.
time. I didn't even
it was
need Baylor.
me.
I just took Gonzaga.
It was me.
So Dewey, just to catch you up to speed, before the tournament starts, I took Gonzaga and Baylor and gave them everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And to Gregory's credit, he's been on the Gonzaga train. I just don't see anybody beating Gonzaga and or Baylor.
Yes, I hadn't seen Baylor really until yesterday, and they're athletic. That kid Mitchell, he's a lot like Ty. Honestly, he doesn't shoot it very well, but man, his ability to get to the rim and pressure the ball, and his strength.
And he's got 4 inches on Ty. That's what's.
He's a disruptor. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably a good bet. I'm going to go watch this Michigan game because I haven't seen them. But yeah, I mean, it's Gonzaga's tournament to lose, it would appear. And then all those debates can rage on about, what team was better. But, we focused on Ty in our conversation, but, and then we didn't talk about Danny, who's done what he's done, how good Wayne was, the most outstanding player. We didn't really talk about him. And then we have, the greatest Carolina player ever statistically in the post. And as good as Timmy is, I haven't seen him enough to really comment on it. But just like I said, I've never seen a guard that could defend Ty Lawson. I've never seen a big play as hard or with as much heart as Tyler. Biased, of course, but those two arguments hold water, and we had both guys. So I just, we'd have been tough. We'd have been tough to beat.
Man, that'd be fun to be able to watch those games. I wish they could figure out a way to simulate it. I mean, video games are not quite the same, but it would have been fun to watch. Dewey, Burke, I'm going to let you go so you can get back to watching these games. I appreciate you popping in on the Inside Carolina podcast, my man.
Yeah, guys. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. See y'all.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Dewey.
Quick interruption,
All right.
Tommy.
Yeah,
Baseball.
go ahead.
We've been talking a lot about football and basketball, but baseball is in a dogfight with ECU right now. ECU just hit two-run home runs in the bottom of the 8th to tie
no!
at 10 apiece. UNC, it was tied 6-6. Angel Zarate had a 2-run home run to make it 8-6. UNC got 2 more runs to make it 10-6, and then the bottom of the 8th, ECU just hit two-run home runs, and now it's 10-10.
Man, I got a text from somebody that said your team just got swept by a 1-8 NC State team. So
yeah, this weekend was very shocking.
Well, when your starting pitching is not giving you any innings and you're having to rely on your bullpen, I don't care how good
the
your
bullpen was great.
Right. I don't care how good they are, though. If you're having to rely on them for more than half the game every time out,
you got 4 innings out of Austin Love on Friday. You got 2 2/3 out of Alba on Saturday, and then you got 1 1/3 out of Will Sandy on Monday because the Sunday rain out.
Yeah.
And NC State,
I mean, you're not winning anything.
No.
All right, boys, we've picked, to use a Buck Sanders phrase, we've picked all the feathers off this On the Beat podcast. Is there anything we have not discussed? Any questions in the chat, Gregory, that we've missed? Any questions on the Inside Carolina message boards that we've missed? I know that
the only recurring thing in the chat, which we kind of alluded to as far as like assumptions was just like a Garrison and Armando update. If Sherrell has anything of note to add, I think people might appreciate a short little thing.
I would say our most recent update is on the premium board.
Good answer.
There you go.
I think you can find the information there. Not trying to be coy or anything, but yeah, I think those are seem to be again, like we talked about with the portal earlier. You never know what could change, but those seems to be the last two decisions that North Carolina is awaiting, because not everybody who is staying is going to do a big "I'm staying" announcement. So no news is good news, I think, is what we said the other day with guys you maybe haven't heard anything about.
And
Yeah,
then,
on the Inside Carolina Live show, I said, "When is no news? What's the no news we're not hearing? That's the good news," or something like that. Anyway, go ahead, Gregory.
And then last one would be a football question that we never really got to. Someone asked, I put it in here, most
Best
improved player on defense that we've seen, Greg.
That's a good question. It's easy to go with Eugene Asante there, just from what we've seen and kind of what we've heard, that there doesn't appear to be much of a drop off from where Chaz was with what Eugene has shown early, and that's kind of what they were hoping for.
Right.
He's kind of the key piece there.
Well, and with that, before you pick someone else, I was thinking about this the other day. I don't think it's as much as Chaz to Eugene as Jeremiah to Chaz, like Jeremiah to what Chaz was, and then Eugene to what Jeremiah was. I think if they get that, then they'll be extremely happy.
Yeah, and I think the good thing for this defense is, and we're going to be talking about this a lot, I have a feeling, in the fall. Jeremiah has always been a great quote. He's always been willing to say stuff that's not totally PC.
He's very smart.
He is very smart. And he doesn't mind saying, look, we messed up in this regard. This is where we screwed up. There's value in that. I mean, Marcus Page, I'll never forget. I guess it was after he lost to Indiana. I think that was his freshman year. But he'd been playing for a couple weeks, and he was like detailing like where things had broken down. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? Like, we don't get this kind of stuff. And maybe that's just me, as a reporter, reading too much into things. But that's always stuck with me with Jeremiah. And I've probably requested him for interviews more than anybody on this team in the last 2 years. So to have a guy like that who's playing well, for one, but has really assumed leadership capabilities. I don't know if you noticed on Saturday, Gregory, but I mean, he was bouncing around. Even when like the third and fourth string guys were in, he was on the field celebrating with them, congratulating them. That means a lot. And for a defense that needs to take another level, another step to reach another level, to help this team reach its goals, I think that's critically important. And so he's a guy I've really got my eye on, kind of emerging as a key piece of the puzzle for UNC next year.
My defensive improvement guy is Jacurious Conley. I mean,
Yeah.
he is all over the field, and someone brought him up in the chat as kind of like, is he the improved guy? And for me, yes, him and Tony Grimes. I think it's Conley, Grimes, Asante in that order for me. Just for where Conley was at the beginning of last season to where he ended, and the talk that Bateman and these guys have about him, it's night and day difference from when he said on the field. Because obviously Grimes had the hype. It was like, oh, he's supposed to be a high school senior and all that stuff, but then he really showed. But Jacurious Conley was not really talked about at the beginning of the season. And when you were talking about with what Jeremiah does, Brian Anderson is that guy on offense on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When we were watching the O-line go against the D-line and Jaleel Taylor was constantly shredding guys, when Malik McGowan stepped up and was the first person to stop Jaleel, BA almost tackled Malik. Like he almost and Malik McGowan is barely even in the reserves as far as for playing time on the offensive line right now. And Brian Anderson was all over him. And the offensive line is pretty crazy. They're loud and they're psychopaths, for lack of a better term. But yeah, so that's what I wanted to wrap up, Tommy. Sorry to take over host duties.
No, that was perfect. And I've never met offensive linemen that's not crazy. And that includes the ones we've had on this podcast. And shout out to them. I love them. But big time offensive lines are nuts, and they're mean. They're nasty. Last question, and I'll ask you, Greg, and then we'll wrap up. And Sherrell, I really appreciate you stepping in and joining us. I don't think you expected to be here for about an hour, but the party never ends, and we all stay together. Greg, how important is it, or is it just semantics that Mack Brown got his rollover 5-year contract or whatever, but more importantly, the assistant coaches getting the 3-year deals? Is that a big deal, or is that just semantics?
I think it's a big deal. Because if you remember, the Fedora final days when things weren't looking to close strongly for him, UNC wasn't willing to extend some of those contracts, and that ruffled some feathers. And that just means that, hey, you're going to have to produce to earn the money, and I have no problem with that. I mean, I think if you're being paid a lot of money and you're being paid to produce, then you should produce. So I think the fact that UNC is willing to go that route and to make sure all these guys have significant deals. And not only that, but they're paying these guys at a high level. And one thing Mack Brown has harped on is they really made a push this past year to get their coaches paid up to like a top 15, top 20 level. And as Mack told them, look, guys, we got you to here. Now, once the team starts playing up to a top 10 level, we'll get you some more money. And I think Bubba's completely on board with that. And I like that. I think that's very smart. And if the team tanks and is not very good the next couple of years, I think you're going to see some of those 3-year deals maybe not work out. But as long as the team is successful and you're trying to build the program, I think it's perfect. I think it says a lot about how Bubba's running things. And I think it shows that he and Mack are kind of in unison in their approach. And so anytime you have unity between the athletic director and the head coach of the football team and you're having success, that's great for the program.
It also has guys on the staff that want to build a program and don't just want to be in a top 10 position and get top 10 money and underperform, right? So I think that's important too.
Yep.
Absolutely. Sherrell, I'll let you be in the basketball guy. Close with a football take.
These are hot takes, Tommy. 2 things. Because my favorite guys, they need some love. Emory Simmons will lead UNC in receiving next year. Hope North Carolina stand up. And in the shocker of the season, DJ Jones will lead North Carolina in rushing next season. Cumberland County will serve North Carolina well.
I will mention that to Joey Powell because I'm sure another Fat Nom guy will be enjoying the shout out. See, it has been fun, guys. Y'all got to stick together.
We stick together. We do. Yeah.
Good times, bad times. You always got to stick together. It has been fun, guys. It's been the On the Beat podcast. We've been live for a little over an hour and a half.
And we've had over 100 viewers for since before Rel got here. So it's been awesome. Again,
it has been fun.
2 weeks in a row.
Absolutely. We're building this, and you guys that are listening, we will decide who asked the best question, and I will get your information from you via Twitter or on the message boards, and we'll send you some Inside Carolina swag. Join us on the Inside Carolina Live show. Just a tease for that. Interviewed a NFL scout today from the NFL Network, and his interview will be a part of the IC Live on Saturday on WCHL 97.9, streaming on Chapelboro. Sherrell McMillan, Greg Barnes, Gregory Hall. It's always been fun, but this is it. I'm getting out of here. I'm going to watch the rock fight that is Michigan and UCLA. On the Beat, Johnny T-shirt, InsideCarolina.com. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Tom.